The idea here is that a woman can probably absolutely be an art director. What's the distinction though? She's going to go be an art director because she wants to be an art director. That's something that calls to her. Versus men. If we think about men and provision and all of the jobs that they've done in history, there was always this really clear reason for being there, and that's to provide for a family, right? Hello, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of Ancient Intelligence. You've got your host, Anya Shack here. And today I'm going to get into the fall of beauty in our society, part two. If you haven't seen part one, I'm going to link it below so you guys can check that out. That really kind of primes the space for what I want to talk about today. And I really got into the fact that the collapse of beauty in our society in multiple different ways, from just what we see out in nature, from how people dress, from the thoughtlessness and carelessness that seemingly happens more and more in the spaces that we, inhibit, is a direct reflection of that, the spiritual dissonance and space and emptiness that exists between men and women. I think it's super, super huge. I think that beauty is everything. It's what we aspire to. And, Dostoevsky said beauty will save the world. And what's really important is that when we think about beauty, what is the physical embodiment of beauty when it comes to men and women? Well, it's women, right? Women are the physical embodiment of beauty, and men are the physical embodiment of action. And like many have said before me, including John and Stacey Eldridge, they talk a lot about how beauty is the feminine face of God and action is the masculine face of God, right? And when we're missing one, the other one doesn't work either. And so there's really been this kind of breakdown in the yin yang loop of beauty inspires action, action strives towards beauty, beauty inspires action. And so when we think about that, we all individually do this on a personal basis, right? Every time that we create, everything that we want to, make in our lives, we're striving towards beauty. But when it comes to men and women in our relationship with each other, women hold the space of beauty, right? And what's happening here? So I wanted to get into specifically like the breakdowns and where it all starts from. And I want to kind of set the foundation around the female body. And I want to start with this. Now, some people might disagree with me, and that's totally beautiful. I have become good with that. I believe personally that there's nothing more beautiful than a pregnant woman. There is nothing more beautiful than a pregnant woman. It is just everything. It is meaning and life and purpose and the divine and everything that matters, all encapsulated in a woman, right? And so, what I think is really, really important is how we've disrupted beauty. It really starts, and this is something that Louise Perry wrote about in the case against the sexual revolution. This is something Mary Harrington talks about, by severing procreation from pregnancy. We've really disrupted the female body. And by disrupting the female body, we've disrupted the beauty that is woman. And there's so many layers to that have kind of come out of that. The fallout of that is really huge. And I made this connection in part one where I was just like, going into an upscale restaurant and seeing the carelessness and thoughtlessness of the staff leaving cleaning supplies out for the customer to see and no one doing anything about it, no general manager stepping in to say, like, this is unacceptable, is a direct reflection of 5, 6, 7 decades later of, in my opinion, this disconnection that we've made between procreation and pregnancy. Okay. There's so much to it. But the idea is what we said back in that time is what we said, that in order for a woman to be successful, in order for her to thrive, she has to be like a man, right? If men have sex and never get pregnant, then women have to be just like that. If men have a hormonal cycle that is 24 hours, women need to find a way to have just that right? And so effectively, the whole framework around the birth control pill and how it was used, I know that initially it was really made for married women that were ready to stop having children at a certain point once they were finished, right? But that's not how it was used. That's not how it was used at all. So we know that first wave feminists were really concerned about family planning, right? We know that. And the purpose there was about kind of upping the ante on collaboration between men and women. So there's some literature about that that I've read. It was all about increasing male virtue and increasing the connection really between men and women. So I think that was where it all kind of came from. And so you have the birth control pill. It was really for women to feel like that they, married women to feel like they could stop after 3 or 4 children. Of course, it was then used by the feminists for freedom, right? It was used in a completely different way than it was intended to. So right away, the female body then becomes a scapegoat for whatever perceived lack of freedom that feminists of the time had around women. Now, this is a really key moment, and Mary Harrington talks about this in her book, Feminism Against Progress. I really think this is an important point, especially pre-World War II, even pre-World War I, post-suffrage, when feminism started rising, the first wave feminists, right? We had these two very distinct schools of, feminism. There was the feminism of care, and there was the feminism of freedom. And this was, as most things are, a class battle. The feminists of care were the ones that were natalists. They were the ones that were pro-motherhood. They were the lower classes. They were the wives and the women of the working class, and many of them who were also working themselves to kind of make ends meet. And so for them, it was all about how can we empower women to feel good? How can we make things not equal, but how can we help women? How can we have women's best interests at heart when we think about how to structure workplaces and when we think about what to do in that arena? And the purpose of the feminism of care was all about honoring differences. And it was all about really honoring the fact that a woman cannot lift as much weight as a man her age, and she shouldn't ever have to, and she should be responsible for other things, right? It should be really, really clear. What are the things that men can do and what are the things that women can do, right? And that feminism did not win over. The feminism that won over was the feminism of freedom, and that was the elites that were white collar, right? The ones that were more aristocrats and more bourgeois, and the ones that were saying, oh, well, I'm not in the working class. Effectively, I want to be a lawyer, or I want to be in media, and I want to be doing all of these things. So I need exactly the same treatment as men, right? It basically discounts the physical differences that we have. And so that ultra elite top 1% of women who never had to think about or bother themselves with the actual day-to-day difficulties that real women have, they were the ones that won out. And so the feminism of freedom won. And so what the feminism of freedom then did was it tried to squeeze away anything feminine that exists, tried to completely squeeze away the feminine, and we are where we are now because of that, right? And so the idea was just that, like, what would society look like today? This is a question that I was thinking about. What would society actually look like today had it been structured around femaleness versus trying to get rid of femaleness? Well, I think it would be completely different, right? We could have a whole dream scenario about what that might look like. It might look like honoring the female hormone cycles. It might look like honoring the different ways that women wanted to participate in public life and the workplace. It might be about honoring the ebbs and flows of that. It might be about never pretending that women can do what men can do, like that song that was popular in the 90s. And it might be just about what are women actually great at that can help. So, like, for example, I was at an exhibit on this weekend. It was an exhibit from Berlin, German art from the 20s, 30s, and 40s. And there was this really beautiful painting of this really sexy, confident woman. And it was called Mademoiselle Yvonne. And effectively, this painting just it stunned me. I looked at her and I was like, wow, what a gorgeous woman, what a powerful, strong woman. And then there was some description on it about how the artist was describing her as cheerful in her passionate ideas, courageous and inviting. All of these really beautiful attributes, I think that I think that a lot of people really appreciate about women. She's was working for a newspaper in Paris, and she's an art director, really passionate about the resistance. She's a non-Jew, and she was really passionate about working for this newspaper. She actually got taken to Auschwitz because of what she was doing, and so it just shows like the passion of this woman for doing what she felt was right, and also using her creativity to be an art director. So the idea here is that a woman can probably absolutely be an art director. What does that look like? How do we think about that? What's the distinction, though, right? She's going to go be an art director because she wants to be an art director. And that's something that calls to her. Versus men, if we think about men and provision and men going to work, and most men and all of the jobs that they've done in history, there was always this really clear reason for being there, and that's to provide for a family, right? That's the difference. That's why the action was always about providing for a family, providing for someone other than himself. I think that's a really key distinction when we talk about provision and we think about women going to work. It was about personal sovereignty and personal emancipation, right? And ultimately, that proving energy kind of continued and continued and continued on. And it became for so many women about just proving that I can do it and competing with men, as opposed to what this lovely woman named Yvonne was doing, which was kind of like acting from her passions and doing something she really believed in. She wasn't going to that job so that she could provide for her family, right? That's the difference. And so I think I say all that to say because there's a really important conversation about if the feminism of care had won, what could life look like? What would women and men working together actually look like? And the reason I bring that up is because we have to get into the provision conversation. I'm going a little all over the place, but that's okay. The provision conversation is important because I was actually sitting with a friend, and she's seeing a matchmaker, and she was telling me that this matchmaker, before she sends men on dates, every time she meets with men, she always reminds them, hey, just so we're clear, you're paying for dinner. That's it. And she said that lately, a lot of the men have been pushing back at her and saying things like, this one man, for example, said, hey, but I'm going out with a private equity lawyer. She makes hell of a lot more money than I do. Why am I paying for dinner? And it's such a valid question, right? Because I get that. It's like the dinner isn't about the dinner. It's not about just the dinner. It's about what does that paying for the dinner mean? Well, all throughout history, it's always meant that I can provide for you. I can keep you safe. I can, you can lean on me, right? And now, when we're at this situation where women are providing for themselves, what is the need for that? Like we're playing a different game, but we still have the old rules that are kind of the things that we're supposed to be looking towards, right? And it's really confusing because this man is right. I get that. But we all have this deep desire to be provided for by a man and be protected, right? All women, we know this. The data backs it up. I don't even have to go into detail about this. We know that women that make more money than their husbands are less happy than when it's the opposite. We know that women want to be with men that make more money than them. We just know that because it's innate, it's instinct, it's our modern moment and our ideologies and the dogma of the moment has tried to supersede our instincts, but it's not actually working. And I think that's why men are so frustrated because men are so logical and rational, and there's like no delusion about it. It's just like, okay, this was the thing because of that. We paid for dinner because we provided. Now we're not. So why should we pay? And it makes so much sense. We need to figure out how we're going to work together and what's the purpose of that. And I say, like, if the feminism of care won and we focused on how do we empower women to be more feminine and be more womanly, right? We would be having completely different conversations now. But because we didn't do that, we have memes. This is a big one that I saw this week that's kind of goes against this whole my foundational ideas. Like, beauty has collapsed and beauty continues to collapse because we have tried to erase the femininity, right? The most beautiful, inner, devoted, like, incredible thing that is womanhood, right? And there's this meme that a friend of mine sent, and it is basically just like this woman. It was a tweet, I think. This woman that wrote, "Men don't appreciate lingerie anymore." And then this guy's comment right under it says, "'Cause y'all are wearing it to Topgolf." It's so good. All the comments were basically just like, yeah, I see it every day. I'm just seeing all of this. Like, you've completely dismissed and degraded and belittled the beauty that is the female form, the beauty that is a woman, right? And that's just like the body, right? And so once we do that, and why did we do that, right? It's because we tried to delete femininity. We tried to get rid of those differences. Like I said, the most beautiful thing is a woman, a pregnant woman. And when we try to delete all of that, then it comes out in the dark, right? A feminine teacher of mine, Jillian Pothier, always says beauty is a chemical language, not a visual one. But when we've lost the chemistry of the inner beauty that existed and exists with many women, right? That in the media and on a mass scale seems to be crumbling and missing, then women have to resort to seduction and resort to the lowly, like, masks of beauty, the faux physical beauty that's not truly inner beauty. That's not the real thing that men are searching for, the real thing that women can have ultimately, that they have within them. They're just not tapped in right now. So I think that's super beautiful. And then I think when the female body is disregarded in such a huge, massive way, the female heart has also become disregarded in such a massive way. And so, like, the men versus women stuff, and just like not seeing men as these like action doers, incredible humans, like I said, that just kind of want to do the best that they can and just need some acknowledgement, appreciation for what it is that they do. And then the mind too. Then the mind kind of gets severed, right? And then there's just so much going on right now. There's like, when the higher feminine order is gone, then you have the lower feminine things that come through, which is like victimization, manipulation, martyrdom. It's why we have some weird stuff going on right now where people are like applauding criminals and chaos, all in the name of like freedom and doing whatever they want. And it's a mess. There's so much chaos out there. And it all comes back from, in my opinion, it all kind of stems from that place where we have tried so hard to get rid of womanhood and femininity. And so I think it's just so important to have these conversations. And I feel like there's just, the next part for me is to kind of think about, like, what do we do? What the heck do we do? So thanks, everybody. Until the next one. Hello, I hope you've enjoyed this episode. I'm so happy to be here bringing my wisdom, my truths, all the research I do into pop culture and evolutionary psych and beyond, to bring men and women the information that we all need to know to find that ultimate harmony with each other. This is the mission. This is why I'm here. This is what I believe in. So if you found value in what I'm doing here, please help me grow the podcast. And you can do one of two things. Either share the episode with a friend or leave me a review on Spotify or Apple. This will help me so much. Until next time.